Everybody. Hope you're having a good day, or a good morning, or a good afternoon, or whatever time of day you are accessing this video. Um, Today, we're going to be taking a look at an article called, got to find it here in my book here. It is called "This is How the Space Race Changed the Great Power Rivalry Forever." You can find it on page 26 through 30 in your workbook. It's a long article. So I'm going to be doing the easy work for you. You're going to be doing the harder work of annotating your text, just like we have practiced in the past few lessons. So annotating, again, involves circling words that you're not sure about, underlining parts that are important, and our focus is main idea, central claim, and what the author is trying to get across to us. Okay, so I'm going to read along, and annotate in your workbooks, please. Here we go. This is how the great space race changed the great power rivalry forever. The space race began between the United States and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics post-World War II was a tipping point in the history of mankind. This superpower race intensified the Cold War rivalry because for the first time, mankind was looking to compete in the arena of space. Dominance over space and the race to outdo one another became a matter of pride for both the United States and the USSR. Paragraph 2. The competition to conquer space was so huge that a new benchmark was set by one of the two superpowers almost every year throughout the 1950s and 1960s. There were many firsts during the space race. The first intercontinental ballistic missile in 1957, the first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1, in 1957, the first dog in orbit, sent by Sputnik 2 in 1957, the first solar-powered satellite, the first communication satellite, etc. At this point, pause the video, do some annotations for the first two paragraphs. When you're done with your annotations, continue the video. Paragraph 3. The space race didn't just leave an impact on the area of space research, it left a wider impact in the field of technology. The technological superiority required for the dominance of space was deemed a necessity for national security, and it was symbolic of ideological superiority. The space race spawned pioneering efforts to launch artificial satellites. It prompted competitive countries to send unmanned space probes to the Moon, Venus, and Mars. It also made possible human spaceflight in low Earth orbit and to the Moon. The zeal the United States and USSR had to outperform one another proved quite beneficial to the progress of science. The work culture of the two superpowers was poles apart, yet both were trying to be better than the other in order to become the best in the world. While the USSR had a highly centralized setup that had an impact on the source of investments in their space program, the United States, on the other hand, got private players to invest in their space program. NASA, the premier space research agency, was also built in 1958 during the space race to counter the early successes in USSR outer space. Again, take a moment to stop, take some annotations, go back through the last two paragraphs, and restart the video when you have done that. Notice how this paragraph 4, was set up a little bit as a compare and contrast. Okay, paragraph 5. The space race started with the USSR launching Sputnik 1 in 1957, which created a furor worldwide. The governments and masses were excited to see mankind taking another leap toward progress. When the human race ventured into space, it was a paradigm shift moment. Neil Armstrong landing on the moon is still regarded as one of the breakpoints in history, and his words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," are now one of the most quoted phrases in literature. In a May 1961 speech to Congress, President John F. Kennedy presented his views on the space race when he said, "These are extraordinary times, and we face an extraordinary challenge. Our strengths, as well as our convictions, have imposed upon this nation the role of leader in freedom's cause. If we are to win the battle that is now on around the world between freedom and tyranny, the dramatic achievements in space which occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to us all, as did the Sputnik in 1957, the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take. Now it is time to take longer strides, time for America, time for a great new American enterprise, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth," he added. Again, pause the video here, make a few annotations, and restart the video when you are ready. Paragraph 8. The space programs of both superpowers were not just for civilian purposes. It was as much about the military space program. Through this, the idea was to fight the battle with a rival by displaying power without actually having to fight an actual war. At that point, the United Nations had to step in to ensure that outer space didn't become a battleground for the superpowers. That is when the Outer Space Treaty came into the picture. The Outer Space Treaty represents the basic legal framework for international space law. Formerly known as the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, the treaty bars states party to the treaty from placing weapons of mass destruction in orbit of Earth, installing them on the Moon or any other celestial body, or otherwise stationing them in outer space. So again, pause, make some annotations, and continue the video when you're ready. Paragraph 10. It exclusively limits the use of the Moon and other celestial bodies to peaceful purposes and expressly prohibits their use for testing weapons of any kind, conducting military maneuvers, or establishing military bases, installations, and fortifications. Soviets were reluctant to sign this treaty because, in their opinion, the treaty would restrict their dominance over the United States in the space race. They later signed the treaty in 1967 when it was open for signatures. To date, more than 100 nations have become signatories to the treaty. The space race didn't have an end date, and in many ways the race still continues. But the space rivalry ended between the United States and the USSR in 1975, when the first multinational human crewed mission went to space under the Apollo-Soyuz joint test mission. In that mission, 3 U.S. astronauts and 2 Soviet cosmonauts became the first part of the first joint U.S.-Soviet spaceflight. Again, give yourself a quick pause to annotate Continue when you're ready. Paragraph 12. The space race left a legacy in the fields of space research worldwide. As the pioneers of space missions, both the United States and the USSR helped their allies build their space missions through the training of scientists and engineers, the transferring of technology, and by allowing other researchers to visit their space laboratories. That way, both superpowers could learn and improve their knowledge and skills related to space research. The Indian space mission was in its very nascent stage when the space race was at its peak. The Indian space program owes its development and expansion to the aid and assistance of both the United States and the USSR, because Indian space scientists and engineers were sent to train in both those countries. As a non-aligned country, India maintained a delicate balance between keeping good relations with both superpowers, especially in the arena of space cooperation. As a result, the Indian Space Research Organization went on to become one of the best space research institutions in the world. In conclusion, the space race is one of the most iconic moments in the history of mankind. It is quite difficult to assess its full impact in the area of space research and technology. One thing is for sure, though. If there had been no space race, then surely the world of space research and space missions would be quite different from what it is today. Okay, again, make some annotations and then be ready to work on an activity in pairs. Thank you for listening. Good work, everybody.